In the forgotten village of Blackthorn Hollow, hidden deep in a valley smothered by eternal fog, a name clung to the stale air like a whispered threat. Even the bravest among them scarcely dared to breathe it. They called it the Veiled Lover, a phantom rumored to roam the forest, heralded by the cloying scent of roses and the faint echo of anguished sobs. Each Valentine's Eve, someone vanished without a trace, leaving behind a single rose slick with fresh blood, a vile omen of the terror devouring the village. They said it was a curse older than any living memory. The villagers lived in restless fear, barricading their homes with iron wards and muttering hushed prayers as the dreaded night crept closer. Children were forbidden from stepping beyond their yards, and lovers were cautioned against speaking promises they might break. For if the ancient stories were to be believed, the veiled lover was no mere legend. It was a vengeful wraith, born of betrayal and sorrow, feeding on those whose hearts were false or whose vows had fractured. Yet not everyone trembled at the tales. Eliza Hawthorne was different. At 23, her soul burned bright with defiance against the old superstitions. She'd grown up amid the whispered warnings of Blackthorn Hollow, but where others shrank away, she leaned in, enthralled by the unknown. Curiosity tugged her toward the very woods that had swallowed so many before. She was no stranger to heartbreak herself. Eliza's restless nature had left wounded admirers behind her, though she never intended to inflict pain. Guilt lurked at the edges of her conscience, but she brushed it aside, determined to find what she couldn't name, that fateful. Afternoon of February 13th, she stood at the forest's edge, her breath curling into the cold air. Village folk hung shriveled herbs over their doors, chanting in hushed tones. Eliza scoffed. "Eliza, please," Thomas begged, dread etched into his features. "No one returns the same from those woods, if they return at all." Her heart quickened at the thrill, but she forced a confident smile. "I'll be fine. Someone has to uncover the truth. Maybe I can break this curse once and for all." Thomas's voice trembled. "It's not a story, Eliza. The veiled lover." She cut him short with a resolute nod, gripping her lantern and stepping past the tree line where the daylight faltered and a brooding darkness took over. A suffocating silence pressed down on Eliza the moment she ventured under the knotted branches. Gone were the gentle stirrings of wildlife. In their place, a near-dead stillness. Her lantern spilled flickering light across the ground, revealing half-frozen earth and glints of something metallic, perhaps remnants of past wanderers who'd never come back. Deeper she went, until the air grew thick with an indescribable chill. She spotted roses as black as midnight sprouting from patches of barren soil, their petals slick with a red, viscous substance that reeked of iron and decay. A tremor rattled her nerves, but she pressed on, fueled by an obsession to see the truth for herself. Somewhere ahead, soft weeping drifted through the fog, a lonely lament that surrounded her on all sides. Her pulse hammered. "Hello?" she called, voice unsteady. "Is someone there?" The sobbing cut off, replaced by a guttural whisper that pierced her soul. "Who dares seek me?" Her blood ran cold. The voice was a chorus of malice and sorrow, like countless souls screaming at once. She spun slowly, lantern raised, and froze as a figure emerged from the gloom. Tall and impossibly thin, the veiled lover stood swathed in torn veils that glimmered like spider silk under the wan lantern light. Its face was lost behind the fabric, yet Eliza sensed an unearthly gaze drilling into her. Clutched in its skeletal grasp was a bouquet of roses, each petal glistening with fresh blood. Who are you?" The words barely escaped Eliza's trembling lips. The figure tilted its head, the veil shifting just enough to reveal a partial glimpse of a hollow, death-like face with embers for eyes. I keep the shards of shattered vows, it hissed. I feed on hearts betrayed. Those who love falsely belong to me. Eliza's thoughts spun. Memories of suitors she'd left heartbroken tore at her. Still, she forced herself to stand firm. You're wrong, she managed. Love isn't a curse. It's precious. A low, mirthless laugh rippled from the spirit, echoing among the twisted trees. Brave words, child. But I smell the guilt you carry, like blood on your hands. Before she could protest, the figure lashed out, the roses morphing into cruel thorns that slashed at the air. Panic seized Eliza. She lost her grip on the lantern and stumbled backward, the forest itself seeming to writhe, branches groaning as though they hungered for her escape. Eliza bolted into the darkness, her heart thrashing against her ribs. The veiled lover's ragged whispers taunted her from the shadows. You cannot outpace your sins. Your blood will nurture my roses. The woods stretched in impossible spirals, as though mocking her frantic attempts to flee. Terror blurred her vision, and the sting of branches tearing at her clothes spurred her forward. Still, that icy presence clung to her every step, closer each time she breathed. At last, she tripped, landing hard on the bitter earth. She twisted around, face streaked with tears. Please, she gasped. I didn't want to hurt anyone. The veiled lover loomed over her, thorns a hair's breadth from her throat. For a heartbeat, the night went utterly silent. Then the spirit's voice came soft and cold. Fear excuses nothing. Yet, perhaps there is hope. One of its roses turned a deep crimson, petals wet with fresh gore. Take it, the lover commanded. Let it remind you what betrayal costs. Falter again, and I will return. Eliza's shaking hands closed around the rose. She blinked, and the veiled lover was gone, leaving only the ghostly scent of blood and roses in its wake. They found Eliza at dawn, huddled at the forest's edge, clutching that crimson rose. She was unharmed, but wore a look so haunted that few dared to meet her eyes. In the days that followed, she wandered Blackthorn Hollow like a wraith, hiding the rose from prying gazes, recoiling from any mention of her ordeal. Rumors flew. Some pitied her, others refused to stand in her shadow, lest the spirit take notice. Each night, she woke drenched in sweat, hearing the veiled lover's final warning. If you falter again, I will find you. The rose never withered, a silent promise of reckoning yet to come. Her life became a waking nightmare. The rose stood vigil on her windowsill, petals deepening in color as though fed by an unseen lifeblood. Whispers circulated through the village. Eliza was marked, and wherever she walked, the veiled lover's wrath followed. She tried not to see the fearful stares that trailed her, but the weight of that flower bore down on her like an iron shackle. At night, she dreamt of the veiled lover, its gaunt shape looming over her, skeletal face framed by that tattered veil. In her dreams, it whispered a single word, remember, binding her in a cycle of guilt that she couldn't escape. Driven by desperation, Eliza pored over ancient scrolls and weathered tomes in the village library. There, beneath layers of dust and brittle pages, she uncovered the roots of the veiled lover's savage grief. Long ago, Blackthorn Hollow had prospered, its gardens renowned and its festivals vibrant. Among its townsfolk was Seraphine, famed for her kindness and beauty. She fell madly in love with Alaric, a traveling merchant whose charm masked a far darker intent. When Seraphine exposed his deceptions, Alaric led her under false pretenses into the heart of the woods, where he betrayed her and left her to die in numbing cold. No body was ever recovered, but the stories claimed her spirit, ravaged by sorrow, gave birth to a vengeful revenant. The first Valentine's anniversary of her death left a single blood-soaked bouquet in the town square, and a faithless man vanished by dawn. Thus, the veiled lover came into being. What Eliza learned chilled her blood. The veiled lover's wrath was not mere vengeance, but a perverse safeguard of the love Seraphine once cherished. If anyone dared break a heart, they risked the same fate Seraphine endured. Eliza sensed eyes on her at every turn, the rose by her window seeming to pulse with accusatory life. One moonless evening, a light rap sounded at her door. Fear clutched her chest as she opened it, only to find a single black rose on the doorstep, its thorns glinting like razor wire. Its cloying fragrance made her stomach turn. She didn't need a note or a voice to confirm it. The veiled lover's patience wore thin. Refusing to cower forever, Eliza braced herself for a second descent into the cursed forest on the eve of the next Valentine's Day. She carried a silver locket said to repel evil, along with a vial of holy water blessed by the local priest. Still, her hands trembled as she neared the clearing where her nightmare had begun. And there it stood, the veiled lover, veil shimmering in the moon's faint glow, eyes blazing like living embers. It clutched those gore-streaked roses as though presenting a macabre offering. "You return," the spirit hissed, voice rolling across the clearing like a sick breeze. "Do you crave redemption, or do you invite your doom?" Eliza's chest tightened, but she faced the spirit head-on. "I know what happened to you, Seraphine. I'm not Alaric. I never wanted to hurt anyone." A mirthless laugh seeped from the figure, laced with both sorrow and rage. "What you intended is irrelevant. You inflicted pain, and pain must be repaid." Dread washed over her, but she set her jaw. "I'll atone. Tell me how to break this curse. I'll do anything." For a moment, silence draped the clearing like a death shroud. Then, in a tone laced with cruel pity, the veiled lover replied, "There is a way, but the cost is steep." The spirit laid out grim terms. Eliza must find 3 souls she had wounded in love and help them mend. Only by healing what she broke would the curse release its hold. Yet each act of penance demanded she relive the pain she'd caused, stripping her heart bare. First, she confronted Thomas. Long had she suspected his hidden feelings, yet she'd never thought her carelessness might scar him. She found him tending to his late mother's garden, face etched with hurt and longing. "Eliza," he whispered, voice tight. "Why now? After all this time?" Regret swelled in her throat. "I was selfish. I never meant to wound you. I'm sorry." He looked at her, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Apology doesn't erase the past, but I forgive you. I just need time." Across town, a crimson petal in Eliza's jar withered into dust, leaving her breathless with fleeting hope. But 2 more atonements still loomed. The next 2 tasks were more agonizing. An ex-lover she'd left in despair, a dear friend whose trust she'd shattered. Each encounter cleaved her heart open, dredging up agonies she'd tucked away. With each act of contrition, another cursed petal vanished. Slowly, the rose grew weaker. At last, on the night of the 3rd Valentine's Day, only a single petal remained. Eliza clutched it as she re-entered the woods, where the veiled lover stood like a nightmare made flesh. "You have done well," it rasped, the atmosphere vibrating with malevolent energy. But one final test awaits. Eliza watched the spirit's skeletal hand extend toward her. "You must face your ultimate fear," it said, "or remain bound to me forever." A chill snaked down her spine, but she closed her eyes and braced herself. When she opened them again, she was elsewhere, surrounded by familiar faces she had wounded, each set in silent accusation. "You hurt us," they whispered. You broke our hearts." She sank to her knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I never meant to cause such suffering. Please, forgive me." For a moment, the world seemed suspended in a hush. Then each specter softened, and their accusations fell silent. A great heaviness lifted from Eliza's chest. When she glanced down, the last rose petal crumbled to nothing in her palm. Eliza awoke at the edge of the forest, free of the rose that had haunted her. Its final remnants disintegrated in the moment she laid her sins bare. A strange lightness settled over her, as though a chain had snapped and dissolved into mist. Those who saw her that morning noted the quiet resolve in her eyes. Though the horrors she endured left invisible scars, she carried herself as one who had survived the unthinkable. No longer did the veiled lover's voice echo across Blackthorn Hollow. No fresh roses dripped blood under the moon. Yet the legend endured, whispered in taverns and by candlelight, a reminder to every soul that love is a fragile gift. Abuse it, and the veiled lover's wrath might once again seep through the ancient woods, its roses blooming red with spilled regret.